Authorities have accused him of being involved in several very serious crimes. Earlier today, the United States Attorney's Office held a press conference and said he was one of the few people they were still looking for in connection to a large criminal operation. But just moments ago, officials confirmed that he is now in custody and being held by federal agents. Last week, when Big U, Bricc Baby, and a few other names were arrested, it caught a lot of people by surprise. But what shocked everyone even more was the hidden connection between Bricc Baby's arrest and the case involving Nipsey Hussle. Here's where things get interesting. When the feds released that group photo showing everyone who had been locked up, it seemed like they were all facing the same charges. But that is not the case. Some of them were part of an earlier RICO indictment, while the Rolling 60s gang had already been under investigation since 2020. This was happening even before the feds started keeping an eye on Big U, who used to manage Nipsey. The FBI says Henley, also known as Big U, had been leading the local Crips gang for years. He presented himself as an entertainment executive and someone who helped the community through different charities. But investigators believe there was much more to his story. They say he was actually involved in violent crimes. Now, here's where Bricc Baby's name starts coming up in serious ways. A former death row artist named SKG publicly accused Big U of playing a role in setting Nipsey up. And Big U is not just facing small charges, he has been indicted for some of the most serious crimes, including murder, extortion, human trafficking, and fraud. Bricc Baby's case is different, but still very concerning. His name is now being linked to multiple weapons charges, and federal agents say he was supplying guns to another Rolling 60s member. That alone raises a lot of questions. If he was that deeply involved in street activity, is it really possible that he had nothing to do with Nipsey's case? Even if he was not the one who pulled the trigger, could he have supplied the weapons? Could he have been part of setting up the situation? As this case unfolds, it is starting to look like Nipsey's death was not just some random act of violence. There might be something much bigger behind it, something that was planned. The government has not officially tied Bricc Baby to Nipsey's case yet, but the connections are getting harder to ignore. With Big U's indictment and the feds going after key figures in the Rolling 60s, more names might start coming up soon. There have already been multiple indictments linked to this situation. That is why Bricc Baby, who was mentioned on wiretaps in Big U's case, was not charged in that specific case. The feds had something bigger planned for him and one of his close associates. Those wiretaps caught Bricc Baby talking about a robbery and sending money to Big U. And if you remember, WAC 100 had already mentioned that Bricc Baby got caught up in a federal gun case about 4 months ago. Even back then, WAC started calling him a snitch. Now, let us be clear. Having an illegal firearm is one thing. In California, AK-47s are completely banned, and there is no way to get around that. But the strange part is that the state never picked up the case. That raised suspicions. WAC 100 was not saying anything new. There had already been rumors that Bricc Baby was cooperating with authorities, especially since he never had a court date for his earlier firearm charges. But now, there is no more guessing. Bricc Baby is officially in custody. His case actually goes back to July 12, 2022, when he was caught with a loaded gun in a parking lot in Los Angeles County. Since he is a convicted felon, the federal government got involved. They say his case affected interstate commerce because the gun was likely manufactured in another state or even another country. However, it was not until his recent arrest in Operation Drawdown that people started putting all the pieces together. There is still no official connection between Bricc Baby and Nipsey Hussle's murder, but the timing of all of this is making people wonder. The people involved in this situation and the connections between them make it really hard to ignore. The shooter fired 3 times, then kicked Nipsey before running toward the alley, which is where the first video started. Before the shooting, there was reportedly a heated argument between Nipsey and the man accused of killing him. Here is an exclusive video from Air 7 showing the suspect, 29-year-old Eric Holder, being picked up by LAPD detectives at the sheriff's station in Lakewood. They put him into an unmarked police car. Authorities say they were able to track him down with help from the community. Everybody knows Nipsey was shot and killed outside his store on March 31, 2019. Eric Holder Jr. was found guilty in 2022 and took the blame for it. But now, people are starting to think that Bricc Baby may have been involved too. Last week, Bricc Baby was arrested, and at the same time, the Rolling 60s Crips, the same gang Nipsey was part of, were targeted in a major investigation. And leading it all was Big U, who used to manage Nipsey. That does not seem like a coincidence. Speaking of the indictment, there are more people caught up in this case. One of them is Christian Forbes, also known as Bus. He was taken down as part of Operation Drawdown 2. The feds say both his case and Bricc Baby's case come from the same investigation into the Rolling 60s. Wiretaps have linked them together. Bus is accused of running an illegal gun operation, moving weapons across state lines. The feds say Bricc Baby was one of the people receiving those guns. This connection helps the feds prove the interstate commerce charge, which adds even more weight to their case. Now, in most federal cases like this, the reason law enforcement finds out about illegal gun sales is because somebody sells a weapon to an informant working with the government. But here is the interesting part. None of the guns from this case match the ones Bricc Baby was caught with. That means he is not the one who gave up Bus to the feds. Let us talk about how the feds work in cases like this. One of their favorite tactics is controlled buys. This means they set up undercover purchases where a federal informant secretly buys weapons from the people they are investigating. In this case, the details of these gun sales are too well documented. The feds have receipts showing exactly when and where these weapons were sold to an informant. If that was not enough, both indictments in this case led to the feds expanding their wiretaps on the Rolling 60s. And make no mistake, the feds are not letting these guys off easy. They have already made it clear that both Bricc Baby and his co-defendants are a serious flight risk. If they are released, the feds believe they could run or cause more problems. The prosecution even requested that Bricc Baby stay in custody before his trial. They argue that he and the others involved are a danger to the community because these crimes are considered violent. If Bricc Baby does not beat this case, he could be locked up for a very long time. Whenever wiretaps are involved, it usually means confidential informants are in the mix. That brings us to two more people caught up in Operation Drawdown: Derek Andre Pard, also known as Grim Sky, and Zachary Garcia, also known as Zeke. These two are facing some serious charges. The feds say they were moving large amounts of illegal drugs, including IC, fentanyl, and MDMA. On top of that, they were armed while doing it. Since they are either members of the Rolling 60s or close to the gang, the feds are treating everyone in this case as part of one big criminal operation, even though each person was handling different illegal activities. This case is getting bigger by the day, and it does not look like the feds are slowing down anytime soon. Grimsky and Zeke have been caught up in this case for a long time. The feds say it all started in 2020, on September 2nd, when Grimsky was on the phone trying to make a deal to sell IC. But what he did not know was that the person on the other end of the call was actually a federal informant. The feds had already set up a plan to catch him. Things got even worse when Zeke got involved. He was the one who handled the actual sale, but instead of selling a full pound of IC, he only gave the buyer 44 grams of a weaker version. He was trying to be smart, trick the buyer, and make some extra money. But the feds were not worried about whether the drugs were real or fake. They just needed proof that the transaction happened. Once they had that, they knew they could build a case. 2 weeks later, Grimsky was back at it again. He got on the phone, set up another deal, and agreed on the same price. It was the same strategy as before, and once again, the buyer was an informant working for the feds. This time, they sold 46 grams of fake product, still not even close to a full pound. At this point, the feds were just sitting back and watching everything unfold. They did not need to rush because they were collecting more and more evidence with each sale. Then, 3 months later, the feds made another move. This time, they sent another informant to call Grimsky and set up yet another deal. Everything played out the same way as before, but this time, Zeke finally delivered real drugs instead of the fake ones they had been selling before. That was all the feds needed. They had enough evidence now to take them down. Looking back, it is clear that this whole operation was never going to work out for Grimsky and Zeke. They had too many things stacked against them. The feds had been tapping their phones, using informants, and setting up controlled buys for months before making a move. There was no way to escape once the feds decided to act. And if Bricc Baby was connected to all of this, then he is in serious trouble too. Because once the feds build a case like this, they do not let go easily. They already had enough proof to take down Grimsky and Zeke, and if Bricc Baby had any part in this operation, then it will not be easy for him to get out of it. Another person caught up in this case is Joshua Halla. His name may not be as well known as the others, but he's facing the same serious charges. The feds say he was involved in the same drug operation, but he was not officially listed as a member of the Rolling 60s gang. However, that did not make much of a difference because he still got charged with the same crimes. He was accused of distributing drugs and carrying a firearm during a drug deal. The only thing that works in his favor is that he was not a convicted felon when he was caught with a gun. That might help him get a slightly lighter sentence, but it does not change the fact that he is facing major time behind bars. Now, let us talk about Big U. His name has been everywhere lately. Today, the feds officially announced that he has been hit with federal charges. The charges are serious, and they paint a picture of a man who was not just involved in crime, but running a whole operation. Big U has been a big name in LA's music scene for a long time. He had strong connections in the industry and was known for his influence. But now, the feds say he was using that influence for the wrong reasons. They are accusing him of running a criminal enterprise. That means he was not just committing crimes, he was organizing and controlling them. The charges include racketeering, extortion, drug trafficking, fraud, robbery, and illegal gambling. But the most shocking charge is the 2021 murder of an up-and-coming rapper named Rayshawn Williams. The feds say that Big U is angry over a diss track that Rayshawn had released. Instead of letting it go, he allegedly lured Rayshawn to a remote location in Las Vegas, shot him, and left his body in the desert. As if that was not bad enough, Big U is also running a charity called Developing Options. The charity was supposed to help keep kids out of gangs. But according to the feds, it was all a scam. They say he was using the charity to steal money. He took funds from the program itself, but he also tricked other people into donating. Even big names like Shaquille O'Neal and Draymond Green got caught up in it. They thought they were donating to a good cause, but in reality, Big U was taking the money for himself. Now, let us connect this back to Nipsey Hussle. Big U played a big role in launching Nipsey's career. He was seen as a mentor and a positive figure in the community. But now, the feds are saying that was all just a cover. They claim he was actually using his reputation to protect himself from law enforcement. And when you look at everything happening now, it is clear that all of this is connected. Big U is now facing life in prison if he is convicted, and that raises a lot of questions. What else was happening behind the scenes? How deep does this whole operation go? For years, Big U is seen as an important figure in LA, someone who had strong connections in the music industry and the streets. But now, it looks like there was a lot more going on than people realized. This entire situation is a mess. It shows how much the criminal world is tied to the music industry. Many people thought Big U was just a mentor, someone who helped artists and guided young people away from the streets. But the feds are now saying that was just a cover. They claim that while he was building a reputation as a community leader, he was actually running a criminal empire behind the scenes. The feds have been watching Big U for a long time. Officially, their investigation started in February 2021, but it turns out they had been keeping an eye on him since 2020. Wiretaps, undercover deals, and controlled buys, all of it was being recorded. They gathered as much evidence as possible before making their move. This was not just about one crime. They were building a case against him for years. And let us be honest, if Big U is not connected to the murder of Rayshawn Williams, this case might not have been as big as it is now. The feds already had Bricc Baby and other suspects, but the murder accusation took things to another level. It is the biggest piece of the case, the one thing that could put Big U away for life. This case is exposing the hidden side of the music industry, showing just how connected it is to street politics. People saw Big U as a leader, but now they are wondering if everything he did was just a front. Was he really helping the community, Or was he using his influence to cover up something much darker? Now, with Big U facing life behind bars, the story is far from over. More details will come out, and more people might get caught up in the case. One thing is for sure, this is only the beginning of a much bigger story. The feds did not just start watching Big U recently. They had been building their case for a long time. Officially, their investigation on him began in February 2021, but the truth is, they had already been monitoring everything since 2020. The wiretaps, the undercover deals, the controlled buys, they had been collecting evidence for over a year before they made their move. And let us be real, if Big U is not connected to the murder of Rayshawn Williams, this case might not have made such big headlines. The feds still had Bricc Baby and others, but it would not have been as explosive. The murder accusation is what turned this into a huge case, and now, with Big U facing life behind bars, the story is far from over. But now the big question is, was Bricc Baby or Big U involved in what happened to Nipsey Hussle? There are a lot of rumors, and this case is bringing up even more questions. What do you think? Do you believe they had something to do with Nipsey's death? Let us know your thoughts. 3 months later, the feds made their next move. Another informant called Grim Sky, setting up yet another deal. This time, Garcia showed up and actually gave the buyer real drugs. And just like that, the feds had everything they needed to take them down. This whole operation was never going to work. Between the wiretaps, the informants, and the controlled buys, the feds had been watching these guys for months before making a move. And if Bricc Baby was involved in any of this, things are not looking good for him at all. Another person caught up in this case is Joshua Halla. He seems to be connected to the Rolling 60s, but he is not officially listed as a member. Even so, he is facing the same charges as Grim Sky and Zeke, drug trafficking and carrying a gun during a crime. The only thing in his favor is that he was not a convicted felon when he was caught with a gun. Now, let us talk about Big U. His name has been all over the news lately. Today, federal charges were announced against Eugene Henley Jr., better known as Big U. The feds say he used his influence and leadership role in the Rolling 60s Crips to run a criminal operation. Big U was a major name in LA's music scene and had strong connections in the industry. But now, he is facing serious federal charges. They're accusing him of running a whole criminal enterprise. We are talking about racketeering, extortion, drug trafficking, fraud, robbery, and illegal gambling. But the biggest charge is the 2021 murder of an up-and-coming rapper named Rayshawn Williams. The feds say Big U is furious over a diss track that Rayshawn released. So, he tricked him into coming to a remote area in Las Vegas, shot him, and left his body in the desert. And that is not all. Big U was running a charity called Developing Options, which was supposed to help keep kids out of gangs. But the feds say he was using it to steal money. He took funds from his own program and from other sources, like the Gang Reduction Youth Development Program in LA. He even fooled big names like Shaquille O'Neal and Draymond Green into donating, only to keep the money for himself. Now, let us connect all of this to Nipsey. Big U was one of the people who helped launch Nipsey's career. Many saw him as a positive figure in the community, but the feds are saying that was all just a cover for his crimes. They claim he used his reputation to protect himself from law enforcement for years. If it was not already obvious, all of this is connected to what happened with Nipsey. Big U is now facing life in prison if convicted. And that raises the question, what else was happening behind the scenes? This whole case is a mess. It is clear now that the criminal world behind the music industry is much deeper than most people ever realized. The feds started watching Big U in February 2021, but they had already been tapping phones and gathering evidence since 2020. And let us be real, if Big U is not linked to the Rayshawn Williams case, this indictment would not be making such big headlines. Sure, they would still have Bricc Baby in custody, but it would not be as big of a case. But what do you think? Do you believe Bricc Baby and Big U had anything to do with Nipsey's murder? Let us know your thoughts.